Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
My name is Sarah, and I work with the Living Archives Project, where we are collecting stories of how COVID-19 impacted various communities in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. Today is December 12th, 2022, and this week there were 196 reported cases of COVID in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, which shows a slight increase of 11% over the last 2 weeks. Therefore, we are both comfortable not wearing a mask. Alvan, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me first, Miss Sarah. My name is Alvan Makoundi, and I am originally from the Republic of Congo. I am a student at Queen's University of Charlotte. I consider myself to be African, of a black person from the Republic of Congo. And I think I am about close to 6 feet tall, and I do play sports. So I'm a big soccer fan, and I play also mostly every Sunday. But I used to enjoy doing that. So I would consider myself athletics. And that's pretty much it. I rarely keep my hair longer for more than a month. So usually after 2 or 3 weeks, I will cut it off. Okay. And I think I have an average athletic build, and that's all.
Great. What are you wearing today, Alvan?
Today I am wearing a white shirt, and blue pants, and regular shoes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So how long have you been in Charlotte? Because I know you go to Queens.
Yes.
So how long has that been?
Well, I have been in Charlotte overall for close to 11 years.
Wow.
Yes. But I did leave Charlotte at some point, and I lived in DC for a couple of years, to which I had to come back to Charlotte because of COVID, actually.
Really?
Yes, I moved back to Charlotte April of 2020 because of COVID, and I didn't really feel comfortable staying in DC where I was living at the time, because most of my friends and family lived in Charlotte.
Okay.
So I wanted to be closer to them during the lockdown and when we had to be in close spaces.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you moved to Charlotte around what year?
I first came to Charlotte in 2011.
Okay.
Left Charlotte in late 2018.
Okay.
And moved back to Charlotte in mid 2020.
Wow.
Yes.
What brought you to Charlotte the first time?
The first time I came to Charlotte was because of CPCC. I went to school at CPCC Central Piedmont Community College. I first went there, got my associates from there, and then went on to Queens to get my bachelor's. And I left for some time to move to DC to continue with graduate school. And then I moved back to Charlotte in the mid-2020s.
So I know you're a student. So can you tell us, what are you studying?
I am currently getting my MBA in Leadership and Change at Queen's University.
And what kind of inspired you to get your MBA, and what are your passions?
Well, I think if you ask my friends, they will tell you that I just love being able to do everything to help others. I'm very service driven. Yes, and but in general, like my MBA itself is for me to not only have the aptitude to work on many different aspects. For example, like when we look at finance, I wanted to be able to understand some of the higher level finance disciplines or finance materials out there. But my degree's concentration is in leadership and change, because I do want to be a better leader in order for me to better make a bigger impact, not only in Charlotte, but in the world, just in general. Yes.
That's
understanding
amazing.
That. Yes.
What kind of impact do you want to make?
I don't know. I'm also one not to limit myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes. I like to be involved in many different things. Like in the Charlotte scene, whenever there's an election, I'm involved. I want to help as much as I can, like with the time that I have at the moment. And whenever there is anything that has to do with service, for example, on Queen's campus, I'm always involved, because that's just where my heart is most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing, Alvan.
Of course. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. So before we started the interview, we did this activity together called a hand map.
Yes.
Is there anything from your hand map that you would like to share with us?
Well, anything from my hand map. Actually, everything on my hand map I would be happy to share because these are the things that shape me. For example, I really do believe in resilience. Yes, I think with everything that, just like many people out there, I've had to face over my life. I think if I were not resilient, it would have been a lot harder for me to make it on the other side of most obstacles. So I believe I am very adventurous. I love hiking. I am always telling my friends, let's do this, let's do that,
Yeah.
So it's definitely fun. I do believe in service, like I mentioned earlier. That's why it's on my map. And I am very family oriented because I have a strong belief in family, in community, in those values, just based on how I was raised and what I saw my parents doing.
Yeah.
Right. And on the end map, I also talked about all the things that are external factors that have just helped me over the years, of which the friends I've made here that have become pretty much family to me. I don't really refer to them as friends anymore because we have been together and seen each other through so much.
Yeah.
Through so much.
I bet.
So, yeah.
So will you tell me, what has your experience been like the last 2.5 years?
Well, I think I can speak for a lot of people when I say that it has been challenging for most people. And rightfully so. It is something that we have never experienced, or perhaps not experienced in a very long time, as a humanity or as a planet.
Yeah.
But I think this time was a little different, at least to my belief, because it was unexpected. I don't think we were rightfully prepared as humans. And so I think it just took a toll on us.
Yeah.
And if I were to speak for myself, I'm a strong extrovert. And so I think having to cope with that during COVID was a lot harder. Like, hence the decision that I made to move back to Charlotte in 2020, because when I stayed in my apartment in DC alone for 2 weeks, I could see how I am an extremely strong extrovert. So I could see how I was getting very frustrated and worried and anxious. So I felt like, okay, I need to move closer to the people that I know love me and will be there with me. And how about we get to do that together? So, which is what I did.
Wow.
What I did.
So you moved kind of, especially during the heart of the pandemic, not at the beginning, but during the middle of it. What was that like? Tell me a little bit about DC and then your transition back to Charlotte.
Yeah. So in DC, I lived in DC and I was getting my master's there. And
was it in business as well?
No, it was in public policy.
Okay.
Yes.
So you did a shift.
Yes. Well, it was always part of a plan. I have a strong interest in finance and in numbers, in understanding data, but I also have a big interest in the public policy side of it. So I worked in DC. I interned in DC in Congress because I wanted to understand how government work. And in school, I did public policy because I wanted to understand the value of data and how can it be used to explain things, right? Yes, that's why I did public policy. But also I got to experience what it will take for someone regular like me to perhaps run for office someday, right? So those are the questions I ask myself because like I said, I do not really put limits to what I want to do someday. So that's why I'm just open to it. So the idea was for me to go and learn about public policy, learn about how government runs, because I did a lot of budgeting classes for government budgeting, and also just understanding how everything comes together. How do you care about other people in a way where you start policies that are actually helping people? Yeah. So I wanted to do that. So that's why I went there. And I thought the best place to do that was Washington, D.C., at the heart of the nation. And once that happened, I always knew that I would probably be in the policy-making environment for some time before I moved back into finance. And then later on in my life, I'll probably consider getting back in the political scene.
Okay.
But,
yeah. So you're in DC,
Yes.
you're interning with Congress, and you're studying political science,
public policy.
Public policy, thank you. Public policy. And then the pandemic hits. And I mean, you're in the heart, like you said, the heart of the US, right? That's where all the government is based out of. So what was that like? What was your experience like when they went on a lockdown? What did you feel? What was the community like? Can you share that with us?
Yes, I think at the time, at least up until I left, we were very unsure how long it would last. I think, speaking for myself, I just had no idea. I am a very news nerd. I read the news every single day. Just because I like information, and I do think information allows you to make better decisions. So just being able to be there and reading the news, and no one seemed to know when that was going to end, was a little worrisome for me, at least. So I think that's where the anxiety came out of, because just understanding, not being able to know what was happening. And I think at the time we even didn't know how it was going to affect us. We didn't know how long. There was just too many questions, you know. So as I was sitting in my room, I used to make those little videos, kind of those check-ins that I do for myself, usually self-reflections that I do for myself, just to see how my week has gone and all of that. And I felt like at the time how decreasing my mood was getting, just because of the lack of social interactions for me, and how it was important for how I interact with the world and how I see myself and how I just love to feel. And I think after doing that for 2-3 weeks, close to a month, I just could tell that it was dangerously decreasing. So,
and it kind of stirred your desire to come back to Charlotte.
Yes, it did. And I think I should also mention that the day we went into lockdown, I was actually in Canada. Yes, I was in Canada visiting my family, and the lockdown happened. And like I said, I watched the news so much. So the day the US announced that we were closing borders, I requested if I could come back to the country, because this is where I'm studying, this is where my apartment is, and all of that. And they allowed me to do it. And actually in my plane, there was only one other person in the plane with me.
Stop.
Yes, a whole plane.
Wow.
Yes, a whole plane.
Alvin,
so,
oh my goodness.
I know.
What did that feel like? You walk onto the plane, there's one person.
Yes.
Wow.
One other person.
Was that a little scary?
Yes.
I think I would have been afraid.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, the good thing is I could choose whatever seat I wanted.
That is nice. You can sit in that first class.
Exactly.
Man.
And they were very sweet. Like, I think the hostess was very kind, and coming by asking us if we wanted something or anything. So they were very kind.
Wow.
I made it back to town, and as soon as I came back, I was on lockdown. Just because I had also been outside of the country, so I was.
You came back to Charlotte?
No, I came back to DC. Yes.
Okay.
I think I came back to DC. I think we closed our borders on the 13th. Feel free to double check, because I have my.
I don't remember. That's okay.
So the day we closed back the borders, the next day I flew back in.
Wow.
Yes.
And then you were quarantining.
Yes, I was quarantining
2 weeks.
For 2 weeks.
So you were quarantining in your apartment or in your hotel?
No, in my apartment.
Wow.
At the time we did not have, I don't think we had the rule that we had to be in a hotel. Yes.
Wow. Well, I'm so grateful that you got to come back.
I know.
Because you would have been stuck there for a long time.
I agree. I am glad they allowed me to come back. Yes.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So you were quarantining.
Yes.
How was your quarantine like?
My quarantine was good at first, just being able to, just catch up on a lot of schoolwork at the time, and being able to write a little bit. Like I said, I do these little videos of myself where I'm trying to just reflect on my week, where, I'm just trying to think about how my week was and what has been the most important moments, most impactful ones, or the ones where I need to perhaps be mindful of moving forward. Yes, I usually do those things whenever I can remember right now, because I'm way too busy. But yes, but during that time, because I was home, so I did one every day.
Okay.
And you could just feel that,
Yeah.
okay, something is changing here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's very self-aware of you, understanding that it was hard. It was hard for you, and to be such an extrovert, like that social interaction is so important for you. So then you decided to come back to Charlotte.
Yes.
Did you initially enroll at Queens? Like, is that one of the purposes, or did you just come back, spend time with family, and then try to figure things out?
The first idea was for me to come back to Queens and reassess.
Okay.
To come back to Charlotte, my apologies, and reassess.
Yeah.
Just because at the time, it was my last semester of grad school there in DC, and I was telling myself, okay, I'm about to be done. I will be working for a nonprofit for a little bit and maybe make my way to the World Bank. I mean, at least those were the aspirations I had at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking these are all the things that I want to do, because it's my belief if I want to do some change somewhere, like being able to work in those organizations would definitely be helpful. But COVID happened, change of plans, and at the time I didn't know what I was going to do. All I knew is that I needed to be close to people that we could be together, in these spaces, so I don't feel as anxious and worried that I was at the time. Yeah. So I moved back to Charlotte, moved in with a very good friend of mine who was a long-term roommate before I moved to DC. Okay. Yes, and we are roommate to this day.
Awesome. Yes. That's so great.
Yes.
So what was your transition like? Were restrictions kind of lifted by the time you came back?
No.
They were still in place?
Yes. I think the restriction was still ongoing.
And the gatherings and things like that was still very limited.
Oh, yes. I think when I came back, we were still not allowed to spend time with people outside of the household. Yeah. So I would just be with my roommate indoor for weeks at a time.
When did you move back? I know you said 2020, but
April.
April.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that really was the hot. That's when Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes. So when you moved to Charlotte, did you have to quarantine again?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But
that's a lot of quarantining.
I know, which is why I was glad I got to date with someone I actually knew and enjoyed spending time with,
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Yes. That was good.
So then how long were you kind of just figuring out next steps until you decided to go to Queens for your MBA?
For about a year. Okay. For about a year, I worked for a little bit from home. Okay. Luckily, I was able to find a couple of organizations that I could work with. Yeah. Yes, a couple of companies that I could work with remotely. Okay. And they allowed me to just be there and work from home, which I did. And a year later, I think it was June of the following year, so 2021, I told myself perhaps it could be time to go back to school, but I also had to figure out what did I want to do, and because of my interest in leadership, I figured, how about we go and get something leadership focused, but that also allows me to use my data driven background. Yes. So an MBA, that was the best way to go.
Great.
Yes.
So now you're in full-time MBA, or are you working and doing the program?
I'm in full-time MBA, but I also should say I work for the school as well.
Okay. What do you do for the school?
I am an admissions counselor.
Okay. Yes. Cool. Yes. How's that going?
It is going very well. I think my love of community is showing here, and I get to use that because, when you're reading someone's application, you're just thinking, how can I help this person, create a map for the future, So that's always the thinking that I have whenever I'm doing that. So it's a good place for me to be.
Yeah. Yes. And what does life look like for you now, Alvan? Now that a lot of the restrictions, most of them have been lifted, are you able to go and hang out with friends? Are you able to be that social butterfly that you are? Or is it still things that you've still transitioning slowly?
I think there is definitely a transition. And first of all, I do spend a lot more time with friends just because of that, having missed that for such a long time, right? I'm trying my best whenever I have some time. Hey, friends, do you guys want to do something? Yeah, but that's just for immediate friends. Okay. I think it was not so long ago that my significant other mentioned, she's like, you don't like going to very public events anymore. I said, I know, I still have that anxiety whenever I go to a very, very public event where I'm too close to people. I can still feel it, which is very surprising for me because before COVID, whatever very big event you can think of, I would probably be willing to go in a heartbeat. And now I have to think about it and see what can I do to at least be a little more careful. And then I also think that there's also anxiety around what's happening at the moment with the flu and all those issues that we are discussing at the moment in the health environment that are also worrisome. So,
have there been any big social events that you're like, I'm still gonna do it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we admit new students or when we have prospective students on campus, yes, and sometimes groups can be very large. By very large, I mean perhaps 200 people.
Yeah.
Yes, and that is not something that I can get around of.
Yeah.
But I also enjoy those because there is a purpose to it.
Yeah.
Right? Because I tell myself, this is when these young people would like to attend Queen's and have an education. So I am helping them achieve that goal. So that purpose just allows me not to think about it, right?
Yeah.
Yes. But if it is for, let's just say, a social event where I know that there is not really a purpose behind it, I will usually think twice just because I'm I don't really see why I should be doing that now.
Yeah.
This can wait for a little longer. Yeah.
So you talk about how socially driven you are in terms of social change. In the last 2 years, has there been anything in your life that you needed to be a part of or been impacted by?
I haven't really spoken much of this, but my family at large, my parents, my siblings, everyone, they all live outside of the US. My parents still live in Congo. My siblings live in Canada. When I went to Canada, it was to see 2 of them. And just not being able to be there for them was a little... I think it was probably the hardest pill to swallow for me. Yeah. Just having such a family-focused will or perhaps drive. I just when your family calls and tells you they're not feeling well and you just want to be there for them. Yeah. So I think that was probably one of the biggest things that I had to deal with personally. And so every time one of them would call me and tell me that they contracted COVID, I would always be worried and would probably call them way too many times.
Yeah.
I do remember my brother telling me one day, he's like, I can give you updates, right? You don't need to be calling me every other day. But just because I couldn't visit. I couldn't, you just can't be there for your siblings.
It's hard.
Yes, it was painful.
It's hard.
It was painful. And
especially when you just care so much,
yes.
And they're a part of your life, a huge part of your life.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you find, having family that lives in the Congo and Canada, did you find that their restrictions were a lot different than the restrictions you were facing here?
I would say for Charlotte and DC, not so much, just because I think both cities took it a little more seriously, right? Now, Canada also took it very seriously in general. They had major restrictions for a long time because they wanted to ensure that their people were safe. At least that's my belief. And I think Charlotte and DC did the same. The restrictions were a little stronger, just to ensure that we do not spread it as much as we could. But obviously there are places probably where it will not be the same.
Yeah. Canada especially had I felt like a little harder, right?
Yes.
How did your family, did they ever talk to you about that?
Yes, they did. I think obviously, at some point you might not be frustrated at the policy itself, but at the situation in which you are in, rightfully so. like COVID changed my life entirely because I possibly would have been still living in DC, working there and all of that, right? If it were not for COVID. So even though at times I absolutely understood from a public health standpoint, these were needed policies, right? But as a human as well, you get worried. You're like, oh my God, this is just impacting my life so much and changing so much of the things I wish to do. You know, so there was that frustration, and rightfully so. Something for my siblings, you know, but in the end of the day, they understood why, right? And my sister is actually she works in public health. Okay. Yes, at the moment, and at the time she was going to school for something related to public health, so she understood. She understood.
Yeah. How about your parents? How was that like? Because they lived a lot further away from you and your siblings. So how did they do with being in a separate continent and just being far away from their kids?
I think I'm not a parent, so I can never speak to how they felt exactly. Yes. But I know that they were worried just based on the frequency of calls. Yes. Yeah. You know, and I also think that it was easier for here, both my siblings and we rent our apartments, right? But in Congo, they live in the house where they don't have to worry at least about rent and all of that. So there's just less worries for them. Whereas here, we had to think about it, and sometimes they had to support and all of that, right? There's always that part of parents where they are worried about that, you know, because what happens if you don't work? What happens? How does that impact you? How does that, do you pay your bills and all of that? Yeah. You know, whereas in Congo, where not only is the lifestyle a little cheaper, but also just the fact that they own where they live made a very big difference.
Yeah. You know, it's a very interesting perspective for sure. For sure. You know, now that, what is your life like now? What are your aspirations now? Do you feel, how long is your MBA program? Are there new desires that have come out from you starting the program? What does that look like for you?
Well, I think ever since we were able to get back to the outside world, I think my life, there was just such a big shift. It's like we went from nothing to a lot of things all at once. So navigating that took some getting used to, you know, and not only on the health side, but just on the social side as well. So I am still trying to figure out a lot of things to this point. And I'm supposed to graduate in May of next year, of this coming year, 2023. And I do not know. I could possibly be working for Queens for the next couple of years or 3 years, just depending on how things go. And probably get back into what else can I do out there? You know, it could be finance, it could be in non-profits. I just do not know it as of yet. Yes.
Do you think you ever go back to Congo?
Well, I am hoping first to go next year. Okay. Yes, I'm hoping, because I've not seen my parents since 2018, I believe. When it was the last time I saw my parents. I know. Yeah. Yes. And I am hoping to go see my siblings as well this year, because
I heard they just lifted the border.
Exactly.
Restraint. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm hoping to go see them as well. Yeah. And just to kind of just make a quick trip, see everyone, and come back. Now, as far as living in Congo, I do not know. Let me just say this. I will go where change is more needed, depending on opportunities, if that makes sense. You know? Yes, I do identify as African, like I mentioned earlier, because I strongly believe in being African. And part of that is being Congolese, which is where I'm from. And I am usually with a lot of friends from there, where we all are from the same class, and we always talk about what can we do to improve our home country, you know? Yes. And because very often what we have noticed is that we will go abroad, study abroad, get a great education, which we are always grateful for, but we often forget our origins and our roots. And I think my parents will definitely not be very happy with me if I did that. But personally, I would love to see where that could be someday.
Yeah.
You know, how can I help with change? It could be as little as just having a school, the way we can help students, because I'm interested in education, because I see that as a way to help impact communities. Like myself, education has been to me. I think if you see on my hand map, one of my major line here says education, because education changed my life.
Yeah.
It did change my life, and just see if I could do the same for others someday.
That's amazing.
I'm very open to that.
Yeah.
Very open to that.
Well, thanks for sharing, Alvan.
Yes, of course.
Is there anything else before we end our time together? Is there anything else that you would like to share? Maybe a story or an experience or something from your hand map? Anything that you would like to share?
I think for me, I would probably say that COVID has had an impact on everyone. I'm certain, just based on my conversation with friends, acquaintances, like it has definitely impacted everyone, right? But understanding as well that some people are impacted more than others is definitely something we should think about. As I could sit here talk about how this impacted myself, my family, and all of that, but I'm also very aware that there are families out there that have been much more impacted, because all of my siblings are still around. My dad is here, my mom is here, and I can still I can still speak to them, and they're still around. But there are families out there that's not the case. So, and I think every time I got frustrated with some of the policies that were in place, that's always what I was remind myself of, that some people are really dealing with it. So if you just have to take being at home for an extra month, you should just do it and stop complaining,
Yeah.
So I have to remind myself of that a lot,
Yeah.
and rightfully so. Like I always say, I'm human. I have human emotions, and like everyone else. So it's whenever I will feel like, okay, this is taking a toll, I will remind myself that some people out there are having it worse. This is a small price to pay for it, at least on my hand at the moment.
Yeah.
So to those people, whenever I get a chance, if I'm ever speaking to someone who has gone through that, I always tell them that I'm sorry, and I just try to be there for those people. And I think that's what a lot of the time we forget, that we don't know what other people might be going through. Some families have had it worse. Some families have had it worse. So we need to understand that. And every time I wore my mask, that's what I thought about. I'm like, I might not be doing it for myself, but I might be doing it for someone else's dad, mom, friend, brother, So that's why I think it's important to remember that. It's important to remember that. And I will probably end by saying that it's, as far as life outcome, it's important to remember what we believe in and what we want to stand for, because I may have a lot of aspirations, but very often it comes back to one thing: community, community, family, love, service.
Yeah.
It comes back to those those values.
Yeah.
And I'm just hoping to be able to live those up someday. I don't know what that's gonna look like yet, but that's also my hope for the future.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you so much, Alvan. Thank you for sharing your story with us and your perspective. And it was very valuable and important to hear. And we are very honored to collect your story and share it and preserve it.
Thank you for making the time.